Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for CEO Exclusive, brought to you by Anona Enterprises.
Good morning and welcome to CEO Exclusive, where we get emerging trends from CEOs and their most trusted advisors. I'm your host, Soyini Koch. We're continuing our series talking about the entertainment industry, which is just a booming industry in Georgia and relatively new for the state. And I'm really delighted to welcome on today's show Whit Blakeley, who is the founder of Georgia's first dedicated investment fund for independent films, and Peggy Johnson, who is the executive director of the Fort Mac development, which is being created by the state as a arts hub. We're really excited to have them both on the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I will make one correction. I am actually the Arts and Philanthropy Director of Fort Mac redevelopment.
Well, we can just record it. Let's go record it again.
All right, we'll let it run.
Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for CEO Exclusive, brought to you by Anona Enterprises.
Good morning and welcome to CEO Exclusive, where we get emerging trends from CEOs and their most trusted advisors. I'm your host, Soyini Koch. I am really delighted to continue our series on the entertainment industry in Georgia. As we've been discussing over the past few weeks, it's just a booming industry here in the state and relatively new. And so on today's show, I'm pleased to welcome Whit Blakeley, who is the founder of Georgia's first dedicated investment fund for independent films, and Peggy Johnson, who is the Arts and Philanthropy Director for the Fort Mac development, which is a new arts hub in Georgia. So I'm delighted to welcome you both. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Whit, as you're looking at and you've been pulling together this investment fund, what are the trends that you think the CEOs who are listening to the show should know? We've been talking about entertainment over the past few weeks, but this idea of an investment fund and the first fund dedicated to films in Georgia, I think is very interesting.
Well, the fund that we see that's occurring in Georgia since they passed the very generous tax credit back, was it 2006, I believe? There's just been an explosion of the arts in Georgia, particularly in film and television. And as you know, the music industry was big here before, and now we see the gaming industry migrating to Georgia also. So it's rapidly becoming a hub for entertainment.
And Peggy, as you look forward to the growth of the Fort Mac development, how are you thinking about Atlanta as an arts hub and bringing more of the arts to Atlanta and to Georgia?
So I moved here 32 years ago from San Diego. And as you know, California is a big arts and entertainment state. Seeing the vision that it could happen here in Georgia. And so I've been a very big advocate of the arts and entertainment. And that is why I am so excited to be at Fort Mac to help create this arts hub, and so excited to be working with Whit and the Roadshow Equity Partners, helping to grow this fund and to support Georgia film.
And why would you start an investment fund, Whit? Why did you think it was important to do that?
Well, you can blame my youngest daughter for that. She was a film student at SCAD in Savannah. I had no familiarity with film other than the fact that I enjoyed going to watch the movies. But I've always worked extensively with investors and entrepreneurs for 34 years in terms of putting them together, helping them raise money. And when I was familiar with and met a couple of producers looking for money, independent producers, I brought my daughter along. I sat back for 3.5 hours and was just fascinated at the whole process that independent filmmakers go through in raising money and getting productions done, and what the trends are in independent films. So I did a lot of research, read a lot. We had a study done by a very famous data group out in Los Angeles called Nash Information Services. And what I found was many investors, individual investors that I talked to, had lost money investing in film. And what I wondered about is, why was there not a fund, kind of a mutual fund concept for investing in a slate or a diverse portfolio of films? And then based upon the study, it identified those genres of films and the audience that was making the most money traditionally. So we simply took the fund concept, applied it to the most popular areas in film there based on those trends, and then applied just good business practice to determining what's a good investment.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the basis for the fund.
Yeah, and I have had a couple conversations offline with people. It's fascinating that the films that make the most money are these little $2 million horror films, like the Blair Witch Project,
Sure,
or the Christian films, right? Like you put in a couple $1 million into those films, and then you make $10 million, and anybody would like to make five times as much money as they put into anything, right?
A good example. I try to watch 3 independent films a week.
Mm-hmm.
Those are my evenings
Mm-hmm.
to get a really good sense of what's a good film, what's not a good film. And I'm amazed at some of the statistics. Look at the movie A Quiet Place.
Mm-hmm.
That's an independent film, John Krasinski and his wife Emily Blunt.
Mm-hmm.
That cost $17 million, $10 million of which were salaries.
Mm-hmm.
There, but take that out. To date, the last I checked, it's made $138 million.
Well, I mean, it didn't really cost that much to me. They had a bathtub and some stuff that they spread on the ground so that people would know that they make no noise, right?
An old house in a cornfield. That's
right?
all they needed. Yeah.
Well,
go ahead, Peggy.
I think it shows that we're looking for content. Yes, we love Flash. We love these expensive movies, but we were really looking for the good story, the good plot. And of course, I just love it that Roadshow Equity Partners and Whit, they really want to support Georgia filming and, film incubation in Georgia. And it's just so exciting that that they want to do this and focus on these smaller budgets that have excellent scripts.
Well, this is a good point because in the couple conversations for the listeners, we've been having conversations after the show, and a couple of the CEOs have mentioned that that content is starting to come to Georgia. Like we've had production here, right? And that's been great. And we have a couple $1 billion worth of production, but that the real money is in the content. That's where it's like the couple $100 billion in entertainment is in developing the content. And that's starting to come to Georgia now too. You want to comment on that, Peggy?
Yeah, it's like the music business, which I've been in for decades. It's all about the song, and it's just the same thing with the film. It's all about the story and how it's laid out. And to have all the filming here because of location and tax incentives has been amazing. But we need more post-production and we need more incubation. We need the story to start here, the crew to start here, everything to start in Georgia.
And is that part of what you hope to start kind of nurturing at Fort Mac, to start to get the creatives to come here and to nurture them so that we can get some of that rich content developed here?
That is my personal mission. My personal mission is to have the arts and entertainment thrive in Georgia, from Georgia.
But you're talking about the actual creatives, though.
The actual creatives, and also even create a hub like we talked about, so that we can all congregate together and work together and create together, just like they do in LA, right?
Exactly. And Whit, why do you think that content would come here when you have Hollywood, that's been around since the 30s? Right. Why would they want to choose Georgia? I mean.
Well, certainly there's the tax incentive, there's the lower cost of production in Georgia, but I think to clarify, a lot of the content has been here all along. And it's been an undiscovered area of the country. And I know just from talking with a number of producers, and writers, that so much of what's produced on the East and West Coast it's repetitive, it's getting a little stale. But as they've come here, or there's more attention paid to finding content here. They're finding a totally untapped market in Georgia. That's been just amazing. And as I had mentioned earlier, so much of the content from the East and West Coast, is very skewed one way or the other. What they found here is the content in Georgia. It's original, it's innovative, and it appeals to what's called flyover America. So it's an untapped market, and then
which Hollywood has really struggled, right? Has really struggled to find and create content that people in the middle of America would be interested in.
Absolutely. Early in my sort of journey to learn as much as I could about independent films, I read an article by Steven Spielberg where he talked about where the markets are migrating, what the trend in the markets are. And it's trending towards the big studio films on one hand, what are called tentpole films. I call them comic book movies that are the $150 million budgets.
We'll get through it. We'll stop doing superhero movies at some point in the future.
There are an awful lot of comic books out there, though.
Right. It'll go like Westerns. Eventually, people just get tired of them.
And then there are the small independents. So the middle market is rapidly disappearing in large part, because of alternative media. We've identified the 18 to 35-year-old market, and what is it they watch, and what do they watch it on? And that's been the big trend there, because for a theatrical release previously to be successful, it's got to be released in a minimum of 300 theaters to break even. And independent films, on the other hand, they don't even have to go to theatrical release to make money. They can be released on alternative media, video on demand, streaming, and so forth, and they make money. There's a production company we work with here in Atlanta called Argentum Films. They make strictly faith-based films. They released one, I think it was October of last year, called New Life. Wonderful, wonderful love story. It was released in just a very teeny number of theaters, but very briefly. But it was a film made for under $2 million. They've already turned a profit on that strictly through video on demand.
Peggy, you were going to say something.
I agree with what Whit is saying. Is I think today is the day of streaming. Today is the day I want to choose what I want to watch. I don't want to be fed what Hollywood wants me to watch. I want to choose, and there's a lot of good content in, like you said, in Georgia that needs to be told. A lot of great stories, a lot of original ideas. We don't need another television show that's been recreated from the past. It's fun to watch, Magnum PI come back, and I loved Magnum PI back in the day, but but that's been done. What about new content, new ideas? And there's so much of it here in Georgia, and also it gives back to our state. I mean, this is why we live here.
A big part of our vision, a key part, which I think is what Peggy really latches on to, is to bring the independent film industry to Georgia, because of the lower cost of production, a source of funding, and tremendous content, and young developers here in Georgia. It's an ideal market for that. So the big studios could go away if there's a change on the tax law, but the independent film industry will stay here. There'll always be a base for creatives here in Georgia, and that's what's really important to us.
Well, I asked this question a few weeks ago, but I'll ask it again. Everything always comes from underlying demand, right? And there are only but so many human beings in the country, and they only have but so much time to watch, whether or not it's TV or whatever they're watching or whatever they're watching it on. They only have but so much time to do that. How is it possible that all this additional media can be proliferating? Is it just that the market is fragmenting? Are people genuinely consuming more media? Are we just like on our stuff more? And how does that tie into your ability to create these independent films when like people only have but so much how many hours in the day to watch stuff?
Well, I think that people have so many hours of the day to watch stuff, but they want to watch it when they want to watch it. And I think that's what's been changed, especially with the 24-hour news, that Ted Turner created back in the day. Now people, they want to stream their television shows. They want to stream their movies. And they want to choose when they watch it. So maybe it's the same amount of time that they're spending, but there's so many more choices and they don't have 3 channels to choose from anymore. They can go and choose it from anywhere and watch it on their phones, on all their devices. So that means that because there's so many choices, it isn't like the masses watching 3 channels and watching 3 movies. It's the masses choosing what they want to watch, which could be thousands
and so
millions.
Those audiences are fragmenting. But then what is the implication for you, Whit, as you develop these products when you can't necessarily pull in the numbers that that a film would pull in before?
Well, as Peggy said earlier, the demand is for content. There's this tremendous hunger with this audience for new content. And this is what the demand is right now, and what Georgia is able to satisfy, is able to provide the content. Just look at the investment that firms like Netflix, Amazon, Disney, Google, tens of billions of dollars of new investment in content. They obviously see a market for that younger audience that, as Peggy said, they want to watch what they want to watch when they want to watch it, and not be, tied to a cable or to 3 major networks anymore.
I think something else that's important too, which I love about Roadshow Equity Partners, is we are very aware of what so many families want as well. I would like to sit, and watch a movie with my mother, my grandmother, and my grandson at the same time. It doesn't have to be Disney. It can be, very strong content, but I want to make sure that, I have a choice, that, it's not Disney or, some movie where I'm going to be surprised, in front of my family. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm an artist and I believe in the creative medium, but I just feel like there's not as many choices. I was talking to somebody the other day who works for the city, and she said, I was watching my nephew and I couldn't find anything on TV. I mean, people say that all the time. I can't find anything on TV. Well, people don't want to watch TV. They want to stream. And if there's so many choices and you can just put in a subject, kind of like Amazon Prime, you can just put in a topic of what you want and then all these come up. Well, maybe they didn't have enough money to advertise like the main studios, but it's really great stuff. And that's what I'm finding. I'm finding all kinds of movies that I never saw a commercial for.
Yeah, and that's that flyover thing that you're talking about, right? Like, I don't want to if I want to watch something with my entire family, I don't want to necessarily have it only be animated, right? Like, it would be nice to have, like a real movie that I can watch with my entire family. So that's really great. So now I want to turn the conversation to talking about you and the formation of Roadshow, and how you guys are working together to build both of your organizations. Listeners, just want to remind you that we're talking to Whit Blakeley from Roadshow Equity Partners and Peggy Still Johnson from the Fort Mac Development. So, as you're thinking about the growth of this independent film community, right, and industry that you're trying to nurture in Georgia, it seems like it would be a very difficult journey for you to make, to like rally all the troops and to get everybody excited about this. And were there unbelievers? Did you have to get people to believe that you could do this fund, that it could happen here in Georgia, or was it relatively easy? And Peggy, how did you get involved and get on the board, and how are you building this thing together?
Well, to answer your question, it's been an odyssey for me, having worked with entrepreneurs and investors, and seeing for 30 years where most of the investment has gone in Georgia, which is technology, and healthcare. Yes, it was a challenge to convince investors that they could make money in film, and in television content there. And nothing's easy. And certainly we've had a lot of non-believers. Many of them were friends of mine saying, really, you want to do this? And for a lot of them, they were kidding me about, gee, Whit, at your age and stage, are you sure you want to do this? And I just feel very passionate about both the benefit to investors, and to the state of Georgia with what we're doing. And we know it's an educational process of educating investors on how they can make money in media there. And I think it's going very well. We're very pleased with the response.
Peggy?
So I'm very passionate about the arts in Georgia, as you can tell, and keeping it in Georgia. And I'm very passionate about workforce, keeping people employed in Georgia, not just the idea of the arts, but actually people making a living in that. And so I've positioned myself as the opportunities came when Stephen McCauley asked me to be the Arts and Philanthropy Director at the Fort Mac Redevelopment. I saw a possibility of workforce and affordable housing and an arts hub. I said yes. I was very excited. When the Center for Working Families asked me to be their Chief External Affairs Officer, I was excited because that's workforce in South Atlanta, which so much creative talent has come from South Atlanta, especially in the music business. And then, of course, when I met Whit, that was kind of the final for me, as far as I've been part of the advocacy of keeping it in Georgia, the tax incentives, being a member of Georgia Production Partners, and being an advisor on the advisory board for Georgia Music Partners, helping getting music tax incentives passed. So it just made sense to me that when I met Whit, that creating a fund, which then funds work, which then creates kind of a competitive workplace among independent to get the funding. And so we are looking for the best ideas. It's not a donation. It's not a grant. It's a business. And we are finding from there so many amazing scripts and business people in the film industry here in Georgia.
Go ahead, Whit.
We've also been very, very fortunate to have people sort of put in front of us who have a tremendous background in the arts. I mean, I'm just amazed. I think it's very providential that so many people with very strong backgrounds in media. I look at our advisors for the fund, individuals like Alice Neuhauser, who has 20 years of managing major studios, having made $500 million worth of films, many successful, and starting her own studio with the help of Roy Disney and the success that was. People like Deborah Moore, who she was the head of production for Relativity Media and took them all the way from Nightmare on Elm Street to Lord of the Rings. Also John Roblowski, who has arranged the film financing for about $500 million worth of films also. People like that. Also our partners like John Adcox from Grammary Media, which has developed an algorithm, if you will, for determining successive content, which is critical. As
successive or successful?
Successful
okay.
Content. They do. They came out of the Flashpoint Incubator at Georgia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were 4 years there. And if you're familiar with the Flashpoint Incubator, it's a very, very rigorous, very selective process of determining the success of a company, helping a company be successful. And they've developed a process for determining story success and then building a whole franchise around that. And as a partner, they are also, they've developed Georgia's first $175 million crypto fund. It's actually a secure asset-based token fund that they've dedicated to promoting arts in Georgia. Everything from developing franchises, from ebooks to merchandise to films to studio. They're developing a virtual studio to investing in distribution, which is the key to success. of any project. You can have the best story, the best director, the best actors, the best performers, but if it doesn't get distributed, it doesn't make money. It doesn't do well. And so we have a partner like that. We also have Picture It Productions, which they specialize in developing television content. Two young guys from Georgia who went out to Los Angeles to get into production, acting, and writing. And they got about 80 to 90 shows sold, television shows, to the networks. But as they would visit family here in Georgia, they found a gold mine of content untapped. So they moved here, and they've already sold some shows already very successfully. I went down there when I first met them, and they showed me some what they call sizzle reels for some show ideas that they were going to pitch out in Los Angeles. And I'm like, where did you guys get these ideas? These are incredible ideas there. And they said, this is Georgia. This is what's here in Georgia. And so to have advisors like that, and then to work with organizations like Slated, which is a very famous organization that rates stories. They're based upon the story content, the writer, producer, and actors, to partner with them to where we can take a story, submit it to them, and if it has a rating of 70 or better, their success rate, is over 300% there. So to work with people like that, it helps tremendously. It really supports the vision for what we're trying to do.
Wow, I have 1,000 questions, like 1,000 questions.
You have to bring us back.
I know, but listeners, we're actually out of time. So I'll just ask, so we've talked about the development in your fund, but is there anything else that's new and exciting that you think our CEO listeners should know? Let's start with you, Peggy, about the Fort Mac development.
Well, the Fort Mac redevelopment is so exciting. It is 145 acres of that will have supportive housing, affordable housing, and market housing all in one, with all the components that you would find in a beautiful development, and yet supportive of the community. So there'll be a job and career training center there, and social programs, and it's very exciting. Mayor Shirley Franklin, she designated Fort Mac as a location to help the community. And so it's very exciting to be next door to Tyler Perry Studios, Tyler is going to be building the largest studio in the world, I believe. He'll have more stages than anyone else. And so 330 acres of filming next door to this amazing, supportive, cultural, beautiful place, which is between two MARTA stations near the airport. It's just a perfect storm waiting to happen. And one of the things that I find that's so great about Georgia is we're number one in so many things, but we lack caring for our poverty and caring for those that as we develop, we kind of neglect those people that have been displaced. And we've also neglected creating some type of arts and culture hub. And so all of this kind of comes together where it's creating funds with Roadshow Equity Partners, but great content, creating beautiful developments that support the arts, and just a lifestyle that's wanted by Georgians and Atlantans. And I believe that developers and investors and CEOs like Whit are making it happen.
Wonderful. And Whit, what about you?
I'm not sure I can add much to what Peggy said. You can see she's a great booster for the arts in Georgia.
Have you actually invested in your first film yet? You got your first film?
We are about to, and it's a really neat story.
Can you tell us what it is, or do you have to keep it a secret?
I can to a certain extent.
Okay.
But it actually was developed by a very famous producer who's a professor at SCAD down in Savannah. He was the producer who did like Fried Green Tomatoes, The Breakfast Club, and he bought the rights to a small Brazilian film that made money, and it won, I think, 8 or 9 international awards. He had it rewritten in English, by a former student of his out in Los Angeles, young African-American woman who wrote one of the most beautiful love stories our Grammarly people said they've ever seen. When I got that feedback from them, I read that. I got emotional reading it. It's a small budget film done by a very experienced producer. It'll be an all African-American cast and crew developing this. And we're very excited about this. It's under $1 million. And we know and are quite confident it's going to have a good theatrical release, which will be neat for a small film like that.
I'm sending you lots of, what is it? My Big Fat Greek Wedding energy, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the energy you want. Wasn't that like $1 million film that made like a couple $100 million?
Love that. I
It was a
love
great
that
movie.
film.
Oh, great. So listeners, we've been talking to Whit Blakeley, the founder of Roadshow Equity Partners, and Peggy Still-Johnson, the Arts and Philanthropy Director at the Fort Mac Redevelopment. And I hope that you guys have a great week. And listeners, it's CEO Exclusive. I'm your host, Soyini Koch, and I hope you have a profitable, productive, and very prosperous week. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
This show is brought to you by Anona Enterprises, where strategy is your access to money and performance. Learn more at AnonaEnterprises.com.